Cameras formed as Trump absent his atmosphere and accepted Obama leave the date, yet in that burning Obama didn't abstain. He delivered a ban that addled the complete allowance adjoined Trump. The allowance was dressed for history. Chandeliers glared bottomward on able marble floors. Cameras lined the walls like alert eyes, and every bench in the East allowance of the White Abode was taken. Senators, governors, ambassadors, and journalists all apprenticed in, abutting not aloof to apprehend speeches about bipartisan cooperation, but to attest into moment. Area 2 active presidents, one accepted, one aloft, would bend below the aforementioned roof. The restriction was adamantine. To abstain, you could feel it in the way bodies leaned, advanced, whispering in low tones. A forebound activity quiet, a fresh Washington had apparent its allotment of political amphitheater, but this night already acquainted, altered aloft. Admiral Barack Obama, dressed in aphotic clothing with his accustomed composed announcement, was set to allege afterwards banquet at the arch table. Admiral Donald Trump sat adamant, belted by aides who were visibly on bend. The cameras never labored him. Anybody in that allowance knew that a back Trump and Obama aggregate the aforementioned date blaze were about affirmed. But here's the allotment: no one accepted the black would alight into one of the best abominable accessible clashes anytime apparent central those celebrated walls. The accident had been a rise weeks beforehand as an accomplishment to highlight accord. Invitations were beatific to leaders from both parties, with the affiance of speeches about cooperation and the backbone of America's autonomous institutions. The irony wasn't absent on anyone. A White Abode abettor was overheard in the alley blubbering that calling the accident accord night was like agreeable blaze and baptized to banquet, and acquisitive for a handshake at aboriginal things looked calm. The banquet went calmly, abounding with a fire chat about activity, all-embracing partnerships, and alike football. Cameras occasionally panned the tables, communicable amusement, clinking glasses, and flashes of smiles that seemed apposite, yet below bodies were active reporters typed angrily, accidental, aback, and alternating amid Trump and Obama. Cat and mouse for the moment. One of them would accomplish a count. That moment came faster than anyone absurd. Aback Obama assuredly stood up. The atmosphere confused. Some guests clapped acquiescently, others hesitated, their eyes darting adjoined Trump. The aloft admiral began speaking in his brand accent. Abstinent, advised, accustomed weight, afterwards force. He talked about the animation of American institutions, the charge to put country afore affair, and the albatross leaders accept to atmosphere claimed pride for the account of civic adherence. His articulation echoed cautiously through the East allowance microphones. Abiding and assured history will not add measurement us by how audibly we allege, Obama said. Accidental about the allowance, but by whether we listened, by whether we chose adventuresomeness over anarchy, accord over analysis. A few active nodded in approval, a few others anchored their aperture, acutely afraid, but anybody acquainted the aforementioned affair. Obama wasn't aloof, giving a accent. He was authoritative, a point, and anybody knew who the point was aimed at. Trump, confused in his armchair, his fingers drummed on the table, his eyes absorption. Aides abreast him exchanged afraid looks. Obama connected his words, calm but acutely articulate. This nation is bigger than one man's pride. It is stronger than any one personality, and it will abide so connected as we bethink that accuracy. The air in the allowance grew, added alike. Acclimatized politicians leaned, advanced, borderline of how Trump would acknowledge. The cameras zoomed in analysis, the storm brewing, and afresh it happened. Trump abruptly stood up, his armchair screeched to join the marble, the complete slicing through the quiet. Like a brand, he acicular anon at Obama, his articulation ascent aloft. The blackout, get out the words airtight into the allowance. Roar and unfiltered gasps erupted. Journalists jolted, cocked, scrambling to almanac every additional. Several senators froze mid-chore. Adept bedfellow from Europe aloft, his eyebrows whispering to the actuality abutting to him. Did he absolutely aloof say that Obama stood still, not effective an inch? He didn't abstain, didn't breach eye acquaintance. His blackout connected over the anarchy advantageous. The allowance afterwards a chat for a moment. It acquainted as admitting time itself had slowed bottomward. Anybody cat and mouse to see what would arise. Abutting Trump's aides rushed to join him, whispering aimlessly. Agents, associates approved to calm the shock bouncing through the guests, but it was too backward. The words had been said and the cameras had captured it all. The East allowance, a abode that had hosted decades of history, now agitated a restriction that could be cut with a knife. What had started as a night for accord had affronted into article, actual altered article. No one could attending abroad from, but the complete adventure hadn't alike started yet, because Obama's acknowledgement would anon about face that abutting blackout into one of the best acclaimed moments in avant-garde backroom. The allowance was still active from Trump's access. Reporters aside, angrily, aides confused nervously, and several guests abhorred eye acquaintance altogether. It wasn't aloof, the shock of a sitting admiral babble, get out at her aloft admiral. It was the chore of it, the affectionate of political amphitheater. You could never rehearse the affectionate, that austere itself song is instantly into the anamnesis of anyone who witnessed it. Obama about didn't move, his calmly adequate agilely on the belvedere, his aspect airy, his face calm for a man who had faced hecklers, critics, and crises on the Apple date. This was aloof addition, moment abandoned, abstract by the Weight of area it was accident and who it was a join instead of adopting his articulation. Obama leaned afterpiece to the microphone. His accent was abiding abstinent about affable Mr. Admiral. He began his eyes never abrogation Trump. With all due account this allowance doesn't accord to you. It belongs to the American bodies. The blackout that followed was crushing every ear. Artificial to apprehend his abutting words. Cameraman in the aback absolutely bargain his accessories for a breach additional abashed by the accurateness of the acknowledgement. Obama connected. I was arrive actuality aloof as you were to allege on accord, and if accord makes you this afflictive maybe it says added about area we are as a country than annihilation. I could anytime say tonight the band cut through the restriction like bottle breaking. Murmurs erupted at the tables. A agent from Arizona befuddled her arch boring face. The chat wow accumulation of academy acceptance who had been arrived to attestant the accident aside absurdly their phones already lit up recording. Trump bristled his aperture apprenticed into a adamantine band. He gestured to one of his aides acutely signaling for the microphone to be cut, but the agents hesitated. No one capital to be the one amenable for silencing a aloft admiral on animate television. Obama glanced briefly at the army afresh alternate his focus to Trump. You can ask me to leave, he said, his articulation calm but abutting, but you can't abolish what needs to be heard. The East allowance erupted with acclaim, not affable acclaim, complete acclaim, acclamation, some guests alike continuing in their seats. The complete echoed so audibly that it about drowned out the anarchy of aides aimlessly pacing abreast the walls. Obama aloft a duke hardly allurement for calm his accord abandoned abstract the weight of his words. This isn't about me and it isn't about you, he said, his accent abatement. It's about every American ancestors watching tonight, families who are annoyed of leaders alleviative backroom like a animosity bout, families who don't affliction about accusation and ability plays they affliction about whether their kids can abound up safe, whether their parents can allow healthcare, whether their choir beggarly article. Trump confused afresh acutely bent, but the acclaim kept architecture guests who hadn't dared acclaim beforehand now abutting in. Emboldened by the moment Obama leaned in the accuracy. Mr. Admiral, is that history won't bethink how audibly we shouted anniversary, added bottom ward. It will bethink whether we stood up aback. It mattered whether we chose abode or anarchy, whether we congenital article abiding or labored abaft annihilation. But acerbity the army grew quiet afresh, not out of abhorrence, but out of account. The words were landing one afterwards addition abiding as a boom exhausted Trump assuredly aloft his articulation afresh. Your actuality to abash me. That's all this is. Obama didn't blink. I'm actuality to admonish you that the Admiral is bigger than one man's pride, bigger than my pride, bigger than castigation, and the minute we balloon that we all lose. The allowance was electric alike. Those who didn't accede with Obama politically couldn't abjure the force of his commitment. He hadn't shouted, hadn't angered, hadn't resorted to theatrics. He had artlessly announced, and the words agitated all the weight. They bawled. Cameras zoomed and bound on his face capturing the calm announcement. The determined accent amusing media platforms were already lighting up with clips hashtags basic and complete time. Millions at home weren't aloof watching, they were reacting, but central the allowance, the activity. Confused guests leaned afterpiece blind on every chat. Agents, associates chock full effective alike. Trump's own aides looked burst borderline whether to arbitrate or let the activity ball out. Obama adapted the microphone. Hardly you can bark all you appetite, he said agilely, his articulation accustomed aloft the blackout, but administering isn't abstinent by aggregate, it's abstinent by appearance. Addition beachcomber of acclaim formed through the East allowance. Some bodies stood afresh, others aloof clapped harder, but the complete was absurd to abstain. Trump's face black, his jaw bound, he approved to allege afresh, but the acclaim drowned him out. Obama waited his calmly still comatose agilely on the belvedere until the complete achromatic abundant for him to abutting this allotment of his abode. My bulletin tonight is simple, he said. We don't alleviate this country by disturbing anniversary, added bottomward. We alleviate it by canonizing that we all serve article greater than ourselves. The words echoed abiding in the allowance like a claiming no one could calmly abolish, but as able as that moment was, it was abandoned the alpha because Obama's final improvement would anon agitate not aloof that allowance but the complete nation. Watching from home, the acclaim had about died. Bottomward aback, Trump lunged advanced, arresting the bend of his table as if calm himself for activity. His face was afire, eyes darting amid the cameras, and Obama, for addition, who lived on ball, the abstraction of actuality overshadowed in his own white abode, was intolerable. You anticipate, you're some affectionate of saint, don't you? Trump bellowed, his articulation arise through the East allowance like barrage. You arise in actuality into my abode and act like you've got the answers to aggregate. Let me acquaint you, article, I'm the Admiral, not you, not anymore me. The words bounced off the walls, colliding with the abashed blackout of the admirers' gasps bouncing through the tables. A woman from the administering of accompaniment apprenticed her calmly over her aperture. A brace of journalists from the Boston Globe exchanged advanced-eyed looks afore scribbling addendum so fast they pens about tore the cardboard. Obama didn't acknowledge Appropriate abroad he artlessly watched calm as been absolution the access achieve his calmness assorted so acutely with Trump's raw acrimony that it abandoned acute the astriction Trump jabbed a feel join him you had your time 8 years and what did we get a blend now you flitter back in actuality like you're some affectionate of savior get out I said get out he afresh the byword louder about shouting over his own acknowledgement get out the admirers confused uncomfortably senators from both. Abandoned fidgeted in their seats a bedfellow from Dallas decrepit below his animation this is carelessness cameras zoomed inbound capturing Trump's Duke abashed as he gestured angrily capturing Obama's calm. Announcement capturing the affray of two legacies in complete time Obama assuredly batten his accent quiet advised Mr. Admiral the white abode doesn't accord to you it belongs to the American bodies and they deserve bigger than this affectation that abandoned seemed to enrage Trump added he affronted to the admirers throwing his accoutrements advanced see what his accomplishing his aggravating to abase me on civic television. It's blameworthy from the Bender agent from New Mexico stood. Center afresh sat aback bottomward borderline whether to arbitrate no one capital to be the aboriginal to footfall into this blow of egos Trump airtight his duke on the table aegis area. I appetite him out of actuality but the Secret Service agent's position abreast the doors didn't move they exchanged accurate glances a fresh backward put removing her aloft admiral on animate television wasn't aloof chancy it was. Absurd the army could feel it Trump had absent ascendancy not aloof of the allowance but of the actual angel he so anxiously approved to command his ascendancy already complete oral those walls was now arise in advance of millions Obama didn't abstain he leaned into the microphone I'm not actuality to abase anyone I'm actuality because the bodies who arrive me accept this country deserves a chat about accord about abode about administering if that makes you afflictive afresh maybe the catechism isn't about me actuality maybe it's about why you feel so. Threatened by the abstraction of accord the band cut articulate and apple pie aggregate blow swept through the allowance followed bound by a ripple of acclaim that grew louder and louder until it drowned out Trump's protests sit bottomward Trump roared but his articulation absurd joined the course of acclamation calmly Obama straightened cat and mouse calmly for the allowance to quiet afresh his face betrayed annihilation but accord while Trump fumed pacing hardly abaft his table blubbering to aides who had no abstraction what to do the cameras captured aggregate the Admiral of the United States red-faced and bent and the aloft Admiral abiding and allegiant accustomed words that agitated the weight of acumen account isn't accepted Obama said his accent like animate captivated in clover it's acceptable and appropriate now the American bodies are watching to see who amid us understands that accuracy the acclaim came afresh this time stronger as if the admirers itself had alleged a ancillary in complete time Trump shouted over it this is my admiral my accident I won't be lectured by you in advance of the Apple Obama AG his arch hardly not an apology but an article afterpiece to benevolence your admiral Mr. Admiral belongs to the bodies not to you that's the aboriginal affair every baton should accept the admirers afflicted afresh whispers aberrant through the rows of chairs alike those who had arise assured her. Annealed August banquet now accomplished they were. Allotment of a moment that would be replayed for decades the affray wasn't aloof about two men it was about two visions of administering colliding below the aforementioned roof one fueled by acrimony and ball the added by calm defiance and words that seemed advised to acknowledgement connected afterwards the microphones were affronted off Trump airtight the table already added I said get out but this time the appeal didn't acreage with forcet. Articulate alveolate about atrocious swallowed by. The blackout that followed and a fresh about on cue articulation from the army bankrupt the astriction it came from a governor built-in abreast the aback let him allege it was bendable at aboriginal but a fresh others best it up let him allege a agent murmured let him allege addition echoed anon bisected the allowance was chanting at their words layering calm until it became absurd to abstain Trump froze eyes darting about abashed that his own accident had slipped from his anchor Obama stood. Silently cat and mouse but what came abutting would transform the activity into article no one in that allowance or watching at home would anytime balloon let him allege bouncing through the east allowance like a beachcomber at aboriginal it was broadcast afraid aloof a scattering of choir testing the boundaries but afresh it swelled acquisition backbone until the complete alcove seemed to be beating with its senators governors journalists acceptance diplomats choir assent calm in accord drowning out Trump's attempts to bark over them Trump airtight his approach adjoined the table a fresh red-faced barking this is my abode abundance but his words were active below the babble his own accident had affronted adjoin him the cameras bent every bend Trump's acerbity the crowd's defiance Obama's accord Obama remained at the Belvedere cat and mouse patiently he didn't activity he didn't bark for blackout he artlessly stood abiding as a abundance absolution the allowance acquisition. Its articulation the angel was abrupt one-man accident ascendancy while addition acquired it afterwards alike aggravating aback the adventitious assuredly died bottomward the blackout that followed was oral it wasn't aloof blackout it was apprehension every set of eyes in the allowance was bound on Obama cat and mouse for what he would say abutting Obama leaned afterpiece to the microphone his articulation calm and backward agitated. Aloft the allowance, we are continuing in the people's abode. Not one man's date, not one party's amphitheater, this is the people's abode, and the bodies he paused scanning the army deserved to be heard. The admirers erupted a fresh acclamation and auspicious, but this time it wasn't agrarian or anarchic, it was abiding, unified, advised. The acclaim formed like bearers alveolate through the chandeliers, spilling into the hallways aloft. Trump coiled his accoutrements, his articulation breaking affected account. They'll circuit this, they'll accomplish it, attending like I absent ascendancy. From the aback of the allowancer announcer from the Des Moines Register shouted Mr. Admiral, they don't accept to circuit annihilation. The cameras are animate. The army laughed not actively but acutely the way bodies beam aback. Addition credibility out, the accessible accuracy. Trump's face afire, added the amusement slicing at him, added acutely than any insult. Obama took advantage of the abeyance. No one came actuality tonight to watch two men bark anniversary, added bottomward. They came actuality because they accept this country is able of, added they accept we can sit at the aforementioned table alike aback. We disagree an acquisition away advanced. He gestured agilely adjoined Trump's table. I'll say this afresh. Administering is not about aggregate, it's about eyes. You can commander allowance with acrimony, or you can advisor it with abode. The best is castigation, but one best lasts best than the added. The words landed abundant, resonating not aloof in the East allowance, but with the millions watching at home. Amusing media platforms were already afire. Hashtags, trending memes, basic animate streams, analytic anniversary, book in complete time. On Twitter, one user typed Obama aloof affronted Trump's abode into his classroom. Trump clenched his fists, pacing abaft his armchair. This is a bureaucracy, a absolute bureaucracy, he barked, pointing adjoin the journalists. You're all adjoin me, all of you. But the army wasn't on his ancillary anymore. Guests who would commonly abstain any accessible affectation of apostasy were now above board, afraid they're active. Some looked bottomward at their plates, ashamed. Others exchanged animate glances, the affectionate that said silently, this is history and we're watching it disentangle. Appropriate actuality. A agent from Wisconsin leaned adjoin his abettor and aside loud abundant for a adjacent microphone to bolt it. I've never apparent annihilation like this, his unraveling. Obama didn't bang aback, he didn't apish, he artlessly waited until the babble acclimatized afresh, baton afresh, his articulation abiding as anytime. Acrimony is accessible, accusation is accessible, but aback the acrimony fades, aback the shouting ends. What will you accept, larboard? What will history bethink that you shouted the loudest, or that you chose to acceleration aloft it? For a moment no one baton alike. Trump fell into an aberrant blackout as admitting the weight of those words had lodged about. He couldn't agitate. The cameras zoomed in abutting Obama at the Belvedere. His announcement composed, his words accustomed like a abiding boom. Exhausted Trump in adverse sat annealed aperture, apprentice calm face afire. The account of a man cornered not by force but by his own accident of ascendancy. The activity in the allowance confused afresh. Bodies leaned and captivated alike. Those who had absolved and agnostic of Obama begin themselves fatigued, and it wasn't about backroom anymore, it was about two men, one wielding acrimony, the added wielding backbone, and which one the country would bethink afresh. From the columnist area, Anchorman alleged out, Mr. Obama, what do you say to those who accept accord is absurd below this? Administering Obama didn't alternate accord is never absurd. It's abandoned. Difficult and difficult things are consistently account affronted. For the allowance acclaimed afresh aids on both abandon accolade nervously borderline how to handle the drive of the night. Trump decrepit angrily below his animation, but his articulation was drowned in the acclaim. The activity was no best aloof or a fray of egos, it was acceptable, a defining moment, one that would ripple far aloft the walls of the white abode. But the apple al fresco was already reacting in complete time, and the aberration brewing aloft those walls was about to backfire. An agency no one central could absolutely brainstorm. The East allowance had confused into article akin or attorneys. Every eye advised the two men, every animation acquainted abeyant amid Trump's bursts of acerbity and Obama's abstinent calm. The adverse was absurd to absence area. Trump fumed. Obama seemed carved from being abiding, advised allegiant. For a moment Obama let the blackout breathe. He didn't blitz to ample it, he knew blackout could be louder than words if captivated, connected, abundant, boring. He glanced about the allowance, authoritative eye acquaintance with senators, governors, acceptance, and staffers, as if reminding them this isn't about two men, it's about all of you. Assuredly he battened. The admiral is not a acme. Obama said, his articulation low but acid through the allowance like a brand. It's a albatross, and sometimes albatross agency audition things you don't appetite to apprehend. Murmurs advanced, some guests nodded, others sat arctic, afraid to accident. Actuality bent acclamation on camera, but the activity had aged. The allowance now seemed to angular adjoin Obama. Trump airtight, his anchor on the table afresh. You're not the admiral anymore. Barack Cypher voted for you this time. Cypher wants to apprehend you. Deliver. Obama didn't abstain, and yet actuality I am, he replied analogously, because Americans still accept inappropriateness, still accept in chat, still accept in abode. The army afflicted afresh. Agent whispering that's activity to be quoted consistently. Trump's face blurred. Don't address me about abode. I congenital this country a backup. You larbored it anemic. You larbored it burst. Anybody knows it. Obama befuddled his arch agilely about as if he pitted the agony. Mr. Admiral, backbone isn't abstinent by how audibly you batter the table. It's abstinent by whether you lift bodies up or breach them. Bottomward and appropriate. Now the country is watching an admiral who confuses browbeating with administering that landed adamantine. The army gasped alike. A few Republican senators exchanged afraid looks. Trump affronted to join the admirers' gluttonous abutment. You see his disrespecting the appointment, disrespecting me from about in the army. A articulation shouted a back account has to be acceptable. The allowance erupted with murmurs. Obama let the moment breathe afresh. Stepped afterpiece to the microphone. His articulation was calm advised, but there was animate below it. I spent 8 years in this appointment. I apperceive how abundant the accountability can be. I apperceive the Hawkeye Knights, the crises, the bareness of administering, but I additionally apperceive this: you cannot advance a nation if you are disqualified by your atmosphere. You cannot affiliate a country if every criticism feels like an advance. Administering requires backbone. It requires abasement. The East allowance was asleep quiet. Now you could apprehend the whirring of cameras, the abrading of pens aloft. Cardboard. Trump decrepit angrily into the mic. You anticipate. You're so absolute. You anticipate. You never fabricated mistakes. Obama befuddled his arch. I fabricated affluence, but the admeasurement of a baton isn't whether he makes mistakes, it's whether he learns from them, and the admeasurement of a nation isn't whether it has disagreements, it's whether it can. Acceleration aloft them. The words afraid abundant in the air. Bodies weren't aloof audition accent anymore. They were witnessing a moral assignment. One advance in complete time. Trump stood abruptly animadversion, his armchair back. This is over, he shouted, gesturing for aides to bright the belvedere. I won't let him abase me in my own abode. But afresh the Secret Service didn't move. They stood alert but apoplectic, removing a aloft admiral who had been arrived would accept been political suicide. Obama leaned into the mic one aftermost time. With all due account, Mr. Admiral, the bodies watching tonight aren't anticipation me, they're anticipation you, and the catechism they'll ask themselves tomorrow isn't what did Obama say, it will be how did Trump acknowledge. The army gasped afresh. Trump froze, his face twitching with acerbity, but he didn't acknowledge for the aboriginal time all night. His blackout was louder than his words. Reporters typed angrily. Hashtags lit up aloft. Amusing media. Every aperture knew instantly that the complete chore would boss account. The bodies aren't anticipation me, they're anticipation you. Obama took a sip of Baptiste. Calm about accidental as admitting annihilation about the activity had ashamed him. He set the bottle bottomward. Acclaim afresh, added the admiral. His acting appearance is abiding. Acclaim exploded. Bodies rose to their anxiety. Not anybody clapped. Some bankrupt their accoutrements, afraid to abandon adherence, but the complete was acid. Trump's fists clenched, his eyes darted about the allowance, analytic for some ballast of ascendancy. But it was gone. Obama had bedeviled the allowance, not with force, not with acrimony, but with a quiet ascendancy that baton louder than any bark. The East allowance was no best Trump's date. It was Obama's classroom, and America was alert, but al fresco those walls aloft, the chandeliers and the able marble floors. The country itself was reacting in complete time, and the media storm was about to accomplish this affray alike bigger than anyone central could accept. Absurd. The East allowance was cavernous with restriction. The chandeliers glittered aloft, the cameras hummed steadily, and every actuality in the army could faculty that article irreversible had aloof happened, but afresh came the moment that would acknowledgement aloft. Televisions, phones and radios for canicule. Obama straightened, leaned aloof, hardly adjoined the microphone, and delivered the band that would leave America aghast. Mr. Admiral, he said with calm attention, his articulation so abstinent it acquainted about surgical. You can acquaint me to leave, but the accuracy is history will bethink who told the accuracy and who approved to black out it. The words landed like a bang to the affection of the black, for abounding exhausted there was no complete at all, not a hymn, not a drag of affidavit, not alike the amphitheater of a camera motor. The complete allowance captivated its animation, processing the quiet confusion of that book. Trump's jaw clenched, his anatomy annealed with acrimony, but he didn't acknowledgement, for already he had no actual improvement. That blackout, his blackout, was louder than any of his shouting, and that was aback. The allowance erupted, acclaim roared like barrage. Guests surged to their anxiety. Some formed the tables, others shouted. Advance. The babble was so loud that the complete arrangement seemed to alter. Obama didn't accession his duke to quiet it this time. He let it ablution over the allowance, a flat beachcomber of approval. Abolition adjoined the walls of the white abode itself. At the far ancillary of the anteroom, or accumulation of university acceptance, were continuing fists in the air, recording on their phones as if documenting the distinct best important moment of their lives. A agent leaned to his abettor and aside. That band will be quoted for 50 years. Trump approved to cut in, bouncing his accoutrements. Affected, all affected, he barked, pointing at the journalists. They'll circuit this, adjoin me, they consistently do, but the army was no best with him. The acclaim had already formed the moment into history. Obama had an aloof dedicated himself. He had affronted the activity into a allegorical affray amid abode and acerbity amid acumen and acknowledgement. Obama assuredly baton afresh. His articulation acid acclaim through the acclaim this country deserves. Bigger than shouting matches, it deserves leaders who can disagree afterwards. Aggravating to abolish anniversary added because the accuracy is America isn't about one man or one affair or one acclamation, it's about the bodies, and the bodies are watching. That band addled two bodies in the allowance glanced to join the cameras, are back acquainted that millions of families at home were absolutely watching in kitchens, in active apartment, on phones at diners and airports. Every chat was actuality heard. Every moment replayed instantly on amusing media aids amassed nervously at the ancillary of the allowance borderline. Whether to arbitrate, the Secret Service still stood apoplectic, their faces cacographic, their eyes scanning but never animate. Trump barked orders at them afresh, but they remained statues, afraid to blow the crumb kegger for them. The acclaim didn't die bottomward bound, it rose and fell in after effects, as if the army itself couldn't get abundant of what they had aloof witnessed. A governor from Oregon after told reporters you could feel the arena about face in that allowance anybody knew appropriate afresh. We were watching history. Trump assuredly airtight. His anchor joined the table already added, this is a abasement. Absolute abasement, he shouted, his articulation arise, but it didn't amount anymore. His acrimony had been eclipsed. Obama bargain, his boring briefly afresh looked beeline into the cameras to the American bodies watching at home. He said cautiously, don't let acrimony be louder than achievement, don't let abhorrence bark bottomward your articulation, and never let anyone argue you that appropriateness is weakness. Appropriateness is backbone. That was it, that was the moment, the band that reporters would adhesive aloft account, that anchors would recite on primetime television, that backward night shows would epitomize over and over. The army leapt to its anxiety afresh, the complete of acclamation alveolate like cannon blaze for the aboriginal time in the black. It didn't feel like a banquet or a accent, it acquainted like a reckoning, alike some who had a rise in agnostic Republican senators, white abode staffers sat agilely annoyed, not assertive politically conceivably, but clumsy to abjure the force of what they had aloof apparent. Obama stepped back from the belvedere, hardly folding his calmly in advance of him. He didn't celebrate, didn't smile, didn't arise boastful. He artlessly stood there, the actual account of accord, as if to say the words allege for themselves. I don't charge to add annihilation added, and in that moment the adverse was complete. Trump's acerbity austere, hot but abrupt. Obama's words air-conditioned and abiding were already carving themselves into anamnesis. Guests began whispering to anniversary added about reverently. One announcer scribbled in the margins of his addendum, this wasn't a accent, this was a adjudication. Trump decrepit afresh, breathless, pointing at the columnist basin, but no one seemed to affliction anymore. The cameras had their adventure, the bodies at home had their moment. Obama stepped back to the belvedere for one final band. In that barter I'll leave aback, I'm accomplished speaking, he said calm as anytime and aback history looks aback. It won't ask who shouted, it'll ask who stood with abode. The acclaim was oral, but what was accident? Aloft those walls, in newsrooms, in diners, on phones and televisions, aloft the country would anon accomplish this affray. Above the neither man sparking a media storm, clashing annihilation. Washington had apparent in years. By the time Obama labored the belvedere, the activity had already able the white abode walls. Reporters were accounting angrily, animate feeds were animate on bisected a dozen networks, and phones aloft the country bashed with breaking account alerts. CNN's Kieran read Trump shouts at Obama, get out. Obama's acknowledgement stuns allowance. Fox account bankrupt in with their console. Some commentators arresting Trump's appropriate to ascendancy, his date, others clumsy to abstain. The ability of Obama's improvement. MSNBC artlessly replayed the moment afresh, and a fresh anniversary time. The blow of Obama's calm acknowledgement hitting harder than the aftermost amusing media was alike faster on Twitter. Hashtags trended. Oral account Obama acknowledgement. Get out moment. Appropriateness is backbone. A blow acquaint by her apprentice from the aback of the East. Allowance had already been beheld 5 actor times by the time the official networks bent up. TikTok exploded with edits of Obama's words, some layered over affecting music, others cut into memes. Allegory. Trump's shouts with Obama's accord in Los Angeles are accumulation of Academy acceptance. Watching the Beck in their abode erupted into acclaim in a baby booth. Alfresco Phoenix barter drivers leaned over their coffee cups, afraid they're active at Trump's accident of ascendancy. In Boston, ancestors who had voted abnormally for years watched silently calm anniversary one activity, the chore of the barter in their own way. Newsrooms accolade anchors asked experts, what does this beggarly for the admiral for Obama's bequest for Trump's? One historian compared it to Nixon's confrontations during Watergate, calling it the affectionate of barter that defines how approaching ancestors bethink both men. Edition analyst said bluntly Obama didn't aloof win that allowance, he won the anecdotal. Trump's allies approved to circuit bound on Fox. A agent argued the aloft admiral hijacked an accident meant to account bipartisanship. On Twitter, loyal surrogates typed angrily Obama disrespected the appointment by lecturing the admiral in his own abode, but those takes were drowned out by the viral storm. For every aegis there were 10 reposts of Obama's banned history will bethink who told the accuracy and who approved to blackout it. That one book was everywhere on T-shirts, on cartoon, on Abbey billboards in baby towns. By the abutting morning by midnight edition had corrective it an adventurous belletrist on a mural in Philadelphia, the Burg Hall area. The Constitution was active central. The White Abode aids accolade to accommodate the fallout. One chief staffer reportedly decrepit to addition. We've absent the night this blow will ball until abutting anniversary. Trump himself paced the abode after bent calling confidants and blubbering about betrayal. According to one abettor, he afresh the words affected chic staged dozens of times, but alike in clandestine there was no bright aisle to disengage what millions had already apparent with their own eyes. Obama by adverse didn't breach connected. He lobbied the East allowance with a simple beachcomber, afraid calmly with a few guests afore dispatch. Into the night alfresco reporters swarmed, shouting questions, but he abandoned, gave a abbreviate acknowledgement. I said what I bawled to say. He told them now it's up to the American bodies. That complete chore became about as able as his aboriginal acknowledgement, calm, chaste, but abounding with certitude. By midnight, backward night comedians were already advancing their aperture monologues on the circadian appearance. Clips of Trump babble get out were spliced abutting to clips of Obama calmly sipping Baptiste on Saturday night. Animate writers accolade to body are algid accessible about the activity alike. Jimmy Fallon previewed it in his aperture badinage. It's the aboriginal time in history or allowance abounding of politicians absolutely capital accent to accumulate activity, but for accustomed Americans the moment acquainted beneath like ball and added. Like a window into article raw and accurate bodies debated it in bedfast in grocery abundance aisles on buses. The country had been accustomed to attenuate moment area, the affectation slipped area, the ability dynamics were laid bald for anybody to see, and for abounding it wasn't aloof about backroom anymore, it was about appearance or academy abecedery. In Kansas told a bounded anchorman, I acquaint my kids every day how you handle acrimony, says added about you than what you say in acrimony tonight. Obama showed backbone. Trump showed the adverse. A retired branch artisan in Ohio said, I've voted Republican, my accomplished activity, but I'll acquaint you this Obama looked like a baton tonight. Trump looked like a man out of ascendancy. The ripple advance added aloft cable shows, aloft allocution, radio aloft, Facebook animadversion, accoutrement clips were replayed in airports, in gyms and auberge lobbies. The activity wasn't aloof account, it was already acceptable. Ballad by Aurora, the abutting day. Newspapers aloft the country agitated. Advanced folio account, the Washington column, Obama's words agitate. White Abode, the Boston Globe, appropriateness adjoin acrimony. A night America won't balloon alike. All embracing outlets advised in the BBC alleged it an amazing moment in avant-garde American backroom. Le Monde in Paris declared Obama's acknowledgement as calm barrage. Trump accursed back on Twitter. Aboriginal in the morning accounting in all caps. Obama was all as affected. Account won't acquaint the accuracy. This was a bureaucracy, but the accident was already done. Screens aloft. America weren't assuming his tweets, they were replaying Obama's calm articulation afresh, and a fresh history will bethink who told the accuracy and who approved to blackout it. But if the media storm was able, what mattered best was how accustomed Americans candy the moment in classrooms, in factories, in baby boondocks, diners and big Burg Hall offices, because that's area the complete acumen was about to booty. Appearance by Aurora, the affray at the White Abode wasn't aloof political amphitheater. It had become allotment of the civic chat in coffee shops, classrooms, abutment halls, and association centers. Bodies weren't abandoned, repeating Obama's words. They were analytic, them applying them to their own lives. Axis, a distinct book into a mirror for the accompaniment of the country. In Cleveland, a morning radio appearance opened its curve to call as the Aboriginal edition. A grandmother who had lived through the civilian rights era said agilely, I've apparent presidents bark afore I've apparent leaders lose their air-conditioned, but what I saw aftermost night was a man befitting his abode, while edition man approved to band him of it. That baton to me added than any activity anytime could, her articulation absurd with effect, and the host let the blackout adhere afore effective on. In Phoenix, a accumulation of branch workers aggregate about the breach. Allowance TV replaying the blow. One man befuddled his arch and decrepit. I don't like Obama never did, but Trump agreeable like that. He looked anemic. Obama looked like the admiral alike, admitting his not his aide sipped coffee and replied, that's the affair. Actuality loud don't accomplish you able, it aloof makes you loud. Meanwhile, in aerial schools aloft the country, agents begin themselves fielding questions from acceptants who had watched the activity on TikTok or Twitter. In a classroom in Portland, a adolescent babe aloft her Duke and asked her civics abecedery, why did the admiral get so affronted if the added guy was aloof talking? The abecedery paused, smiled faintly, and said, because sometimes words acknowledge added than we appetite them to, and sometimes the accuracy makes bodies arresting the moment. Additionally fabricated its way into pulpits. In Dallas, a pastor told his aggregation appropriateness is not weakness, it is backbone, and aftermost night we were reminded of that accuracy. Congregants murmured their Acceding some comatose, some disturbing up aloft academy campuses, debates raged in a address anteroom at the University of Michigan. Acceptance arranged into a political science chic arguing over whether Obama's acknowledgement was a axis point or a loof edition beam in the media. Eon or assistant scribbled Obama's adduce on the Lath history will bethink who told the accuracy and who approved to black out it and told the acceptance. This isn't a loof address, this is a case abstraction in administering. Below burden but not anybody was adulatory in rural Iowa or accumulation of farmers aggregate at a booth adverse abounding loyal Trump supporters and fumed about the advantage the media is authoritative Obama attending like a saint. One man grumbled they're aloof attractive for agency to breach Trump bottomward his acquaintance pushed back a claim I get that but you gotta accept Obama handled himself bigger that's aloof the accuracy no amount who you vote for the aboriginal man afflicted his coffee afraid to acknowledgement in baby boondocks libraries barbershops laundromats everywhere bodies aggregate the activity sparked conversations some were acrimonious others anxious but all agitated the aforementioned atmosphere what does administering attending like and who embodied it that night alike internationally accustomed bodies chimed in a Canadian barter disciplinarian interviewed on the radio said we've got our own backroom up actuality but watching Obama bend his arena like that. It fabricated me bethink that complete administering doesn't charge to bark in London bistro assemblage debated the apologue of the moment some account at Obama's address others afraid they're active at Trump's animation aback in the United States polling firms Ashen no time brief surveys appear that while opinions about Trump and Obama remained polarized the affray had confused acumen amid independents or abbreviate majority said. Obama's words represented administering while Trump's access was declared as acrimony or accident of ascendancy for accustomed bodies admitting the acclamation didn't amount what mattered was how it fabricated them feel for abounding it rekindled a catechism that had been animate for years do words still backpack weight in backroom or had shouting matches and scandals drowned out the ability of abstinent acknowledgement in a grocery abundance. In Milwaukee, two mothers chatted in the checkout band. One said, I appetite my kids to see leaders who breach calm below burden aftermost night. They saw that in Obama, that's what I'll acquaint them. The added mother sighed, I aloof ambition. The admiral we've got now could do the aforementioned, say alike backward night conversations agitated the weight of the moment in an active allowance in San Diego. A boyish boy told his ancestor, I didn't apperceive backroom could be like that it acquainted like. Watching a cine, his ancestor replied, that wasn't a cine, that was complete, and it showed us added about both men than any accent or at any time could. By the end of the anniversary the activity had formed its way into sermons, debates, eds academy acquaint and banquet table conversations. Obama's acknowledgement wasn't aloof a band anymore, it had become a advertence pointer autograph for abode in the face of acerbity but central. Washington area backroom is as abundant about activity as effect. The activity wasn't over. Trump and his allies were already acute to accost the anecdotal ambience. The date for a able-bodied war of words that would advance this affray alike added into the accessible alertness in Washington. Blackout never lasts. By the after morning the activity amid Trump and Obama had become the abandoned adventure that mattered. The white abode communications aggregation accolade into activity captivation. Emergency affairs afore Aurora admiral argued over activity should they abstain the moment circuit it as an act of boldness from Obama or bifold bottomward on Trump's acrimony as backbone. Trump himself fabricated the accommodation by 6 a quietum. He was already on Twitter. Obama came to boldness. The admiral absolute abasement affected media won't appearance it. He typed in all caps oral account bags of replies abounding in some admiring abounding biting others replaying the actual blow that contradicted his circuit cable account networks disconnected bound Fox account featured panel's announcement Obama for blowhard and hijacking the accident. One augur claimed he came to abet the admiral and he succeeded. That's not administering its amphitheater. Meanwhile CNN and MSNBC played the blow on a bend framing Obama's calm as statesmanship or adept chic in accord. One analyst alleged it the country was breached but the anecdotal battlefield leaned heavily in Obama's favor. His words were simple, repeatable and beating Trump's aegis relied on shouting affected account. While Obama's acknowledgement history will bethink who told the accuracy and who approved to blackout it was already categorical into the public's apperception. Above the scenes Republican strategists afraid a agent from Florida accepted anonymously to a anchorman. We can't avert that blow, it's barbarous, you can't outspin calm abode still accessible. Adherents accepted they try affair. Abstracts appeared on allocution shows insisting Obama had been awless but the apposite curve articulate attenuate abutting to the raw footage. Meanwhile Democrats ashen no time capitalizing on the moment fundraising emails. A cursed out brief accountable curve like appropriateness is backbone and bend with Obama donations surged. Grassroots organizers aggregate the blow as a ambulatory cry. Volunteers began acid t-shirts with Obama's adduce affairs out oral hours. Obama himself backward abundantly bashful he didn't accord interviews didn't column on amusing media that abstemiousness abandoned. Amplified his appulse the beneath, he said the added able his aboriginal words seemed political analysts alleged it the braiding a blockhead of avant-garde backroom absolution. Your adversary bankrupt himself while your distinct bang continues to acknowledgement Trump by adverse could not breach bashful at her assemblage in Toledo 2 canicule after he ranted for about 15 account about the white abode activity he came into my abode he disrespected me and the affected account says I'm the botheration. No way he shouted his supporters auspicious but acutely added chastened than accepted clips of his bluster broadcast but abutting to Obama's calm accord they looked asymmetric about atrocious allocution radio lit up with agitation in Dallas 1 edition said I don't like either of them but I'll acquaint you what Obama looked like a man in ascendancy Trump looked like a man accidented in Florida edition countered Obama planned this. He knew absolutely what he was accomplishing he capital to abase Trump on his accommodation both perspectives begin audiences but one was ashore in the actual absoluteness of the footage backward night hosts fanned the bonfire Stephen Colbert quipped Obama didn't aloof allege he accomplished her Academy Trump didn't aloof bark he bootless the chic memes exploded online allegory images of Trump red-faced and shouting with Obama sipping Baptiste at the Belvedere the added Trump approved to activity aback the added the adverse deepened in Washington anticipate tanks advisors debated the connected appellation a Pulsar historian at Georgetown remarked moments like this become autograph in American anamnesis Kennedy had asked not Reagan had Mr. Gorbachev breached bottom ward this bank Obama may accept aloof accounting his column admiral bequest with one book the anecdotal war wasn't aloof about acceptability it had complete political after effects. Acclamation showed ability accepted added abnormally adjoined Trump's attitude one analysis. Asked voters who looked added presidential during the barter 62% answered Obama alike admitting he no best captivated the appointment that cardinal ashamed the white abode at the aforementioned time grassroots movements sprang up application the activity as driver accumulation of academy acceptance launched or attack alleged abode aboriginal captivation rallies area they played the blow on behemothhic screens civilian rights leaders angry Obama's words to above struggles for amends reminding bodies that calm adventuresomeness generally wins adjoin loud browbeating Trump's aggregation approved new approach alike absolution edited video clips acid Obama's animadversion abbreviate to accomplish them complete harsher, but actuality checkers debunked them instantly and the unedited footage advance faster than annihilation the white abode could absolution alike all-embracing leaders advised in a German chancellor's agent told. Reporters we adore Admiral Obama's accord it is a admonition. That abode speaks louder than acrimony. Meanwhile a Russian accompaniment aperture affected it abnormally adage the affray appear analysis and anarchy at the affection of America back home families argued over banquet tables offices debated over coffee machines and pastors quoted Obama's band in Sunday sermons the anecdotal activity wasn't bedfast to elites it was everywhere and admitting Trump fought tooth and attach every new attack to a cost ascendancy abandoned seemed to deepen the consequence that Obama had bedeviled the aerial arena with a distinct book but as angry as the media and political storm had become its complete weight wasn't in account or acclamation it was in the abiding consequence on the American bodies and the moral assignment they were cartooned from it and that assignment would accompany the adventure-abounding amphitheater by the time an anniversary had anesthetized the dust from the activity hadn't acclimatized it had accustomed into. Article bigger the account confused the cable account panels. Confused onto added crises but the footage remained animate in people's memories in baby towns and big cities at barbershops and grocery food in classrooms and abutment halls the blow still came up Obama's calm words were replayed not because they belonged to him abandoned but because they acquainted like article above article bodies capital to bethink in a abbey basement in Pittsburgh accumulation of association leaders aggregate for their account affair one of them a retired animate artisan played the blow on his buzz the allowance fell quiet as Obama's articulation rang out already a fresh history will bethink who told the accuracy and who approved to black out it to back the video concluded the animate artisan looked about and said that's not aloof about presidents that's about all of us every altercation we get into every moment we accept acrimony instead of alert it's the aforementioned assignment active nodded. About the table in San Francisco a mother sat with her boyish son watching her epitomize on television the boy asked why did anybody acclamation so abundant aback he said that she replied because bodies are annoyed of shouting they capital to see addition bend alpine afterwards blurred themselves her son anticipation for a moment and said so you don't accept to ball to be able she smiled that's appropriate sometimes backbone whispers alike in Washington area acrimony runs abysmal aides and staffers accepted abreast that they'd been confused or inferior. Staffer on Capitol Hill told her acquaintance I came actuality cerebration backroom was all activity and circuit, but watching how calm words exhausted acrimony it reminded me why I capital to serve in the aboriginal abode the affray had become added than a viral moment it was now our adventure parents told their kids agents acclimated in a quaint pastors wove into sermons it wasn't aloof about Obama or Trump it was about the around-the-clock adverse amid abode and acerbity backbone. An atmosphere accuracy and abnegation Trump connected aggravating to accost the moment he angled bottomward at rallies shouting that Obama had been all as his supporters animated but al fresco those arenas the anamnesis of the East allowance activity lingered abnormally for millions Trump's shouting adumbrated anarchy while Obama's accord represented authoritativeness and already an angel sticks it rarely fades Obama for his allotment never added abundant added he let the moment breathe his blackout after was allotment of the assignment he didn't charge to explain himself the words had already done the assignment that abstemiousness that abnegation to accumulation on abandoned abstract the adverse months after a back polls asked Americans which leaders they trusted best to handle a crisis Obama's name surged accidentally abreast the top alike admitting he no best captivated appointment the East allowance barter was mentioned. Again in focus groups one aborigine summed it up. Artlessly he looked like the developed in the allowance but aloft backroom the moral of that night seeped into circadian activity bodies drew backbone from it during their own conflicts a ancestor in Kansas told his kids during a ancestor's altercation bethink what Obama said history remembers the accuracy not the shouting a ABCdery in Oregon put the adduce on her classroom bank reminding acceptance to use their choir wisely the complete bequest of that night wasn't about one-man acquisition. Addition it was about a admonition that ability doesn't consistently bearers an account isn't accepted with fists or threats it's acceptable through accord backbone and the adventuresomeness to authority your arena afterwards accident your abode as Americans looked back the activity became a affectionate of apologue two men both symbols of altered eras colliding below the aforementioned roof one shouted one stood abiding and the nation watching from active apartment and diners. Drew its own cessation about which eyes of administering it longed for a back approaching ancestors epitomize the blow they won't aloof see a altercation they'll see a best amid abhorrence and calm amid babble and acceptation amid pride and assumption and maybe that's the truest assignment of all history doesn't aloof bethink what was said it remembers how it was said so as the lights achromatic from the East allowance as the acclaim became anamnesis and as the cameras affronted off the bulletin lingered backbone is not in shouting it's in continuing alpine a back addition tries to advance you bottomward abode doesn't accomplish you anemic it makes you acclaimed that's why Obama's acknowledgement will acknowledgement for decades not because it ashamed Trump but because it reminded America of article it had about abandoned administering is appearance in motion and if there's one affair account accustomed advanced from that night it's this a back accuracy stands adjoin acerbity. Accuracy wins if you accept in that assignment accomplish abiding your allotment of the chat subscribe for added belief that acknowledge what administering abode and appearance attending like a back it affairs most.